Next we have giants. While this one seems vague, later tiers get into it more specifically, but essentially in the Old Testament of the Bible there are several references to giants happening, and obviously today there doesn't seem to be any. However, this conspiracy, as we get into it later, applies to the deep state and cover-ups and things such as, so I don't want to spoil any of it yet, but this is a good mention that asterisk mark, so to speak. We'll get to it later. Nephilim is what I was referring to earlier when speaking of giants. Nephilim is a more specific concept. Specifically in the Old Testament, it says that some of the angels that fell to earth whenever Satan was cast out had children with humans on earth, and that created creatures known as Nephilim, or giants. In the Old Testament, several of the tribes that were wiped out, or ordered to be wiped out by God, were these Nephilim creatures. Famous characters such as Goliath from the Bible are specific instances of it. Where this goes further is the idea that they still exist in modern day, or small tribes and civilizations are ever. Even going off of Pangea, that would mean there was a giant portion of land that just doesn't exist anymore, with the idea being whenever the plate shifted, it simply sank below water. The name of this unidentified content was called Lemuria. Get it? Lemuria. Near the coast of where this supposed Lemuria is supposed to be is an area known as Mount Shasta. Locals have said that at night you can see people leaving in robes, and these people are tall, like much taller than any person can be, 9 to 10 feet. Supposedly beneath Mount Shasta is a completely hollow ground, and that the survivors of this Lemuria sought it for shelter and have lived under there, untouched by society ever since. The Plain of Jars is interesting. In Laos, there are these fields that are all grouped together that hold anywhere between 1 to 400 of these giant 9-foot wide stone jars. They've all been carved out from stone, most of them have lids with them, and they're just sitting in these fields and no one knows where they came from. The locals in the area talk of legends and say that giants used to roam this land. And there's again giants being mentioned from the past years. So if you were to get to the secret plane of Agartha, it would theoretically be Nazis and giants. So do with that information what you will. In the idea that on all their maps they had this region located far to the north known as Thule, in which they said that's where sea monsters came from, that's where these giants came from, etc., etc. These giant stones are assembled into these piles and no one knows why. Theories have originally ranged that maybe a castle was going to be built there and just hadn't, but there's no record of that throughout history. To giants putting the stones there's giants again. The Smithsonian smashed thousands of giant human skulls in order to maintain the theory of evolution the way science saw it at the time. This doesn't just stop at skulls though. They destroyed other bones such as femurs that were 4 feet long because it didn't match the current theories of the time. I guess that's the way science worked back then. If it didn't support your theory, just destroy it. What's even weirder is that on examining them, several of the skulls were elongated, and not to the point of skull binding that is found in several sort of African cultures in old world history, like these very, very long non-human looking skulls. It is estimated that the caves are as old as 4000 BC. Research became scant after a group of researchers went to the cave, and upon getting to the end of one of the systems, one of the chief researchers said that she approached a giant drop-off, and then in shining her flashlight to the other side, she saw a sort of embankment that 25 people came out of, each of which were 20 feet tall and wearing robes. When they saw her with the flashlight, they all looked towards her and began reaching out their arms. Her and the rest of the research team got out of there. Cap Dwa is the name given to the skeleton of an Argentinian giant, which has been famous for some time throughout history. Not only that, but this 12-foot tall skeleton has 2 heads. And the story goes that in 1673, Spaniards had captured it in Argentina and were bringing it back to Spain. They had it tied to the mast of the ship, to which the giant broke loose, killed 4 sailors, and was eventually killed by the crew, to which the body was brought back and hosted in museums and circuses and things such as. I'm just going to start like a history series on this channel where I take tragedies throughout history like wars and famines or whatever and make entirely baseless claims like the plague, right? Those people weren't killed by a disease. No, it was giants and also Hitler. And then I'll just turn off the comments and say that anyone who disagrees with me is in on the conspiracy. YouTube's so fun. However, there are theories circulating that these old original founders of the island died and were set in their place as the statues. Now, while most normies would take this to mean that the statues were built on top of the Rapanuians' gravesite or perhaps their land, cool people believe that perhaps these statues aren't statues at all and are quite literally the fossilized remains of these first people. Or, in other words, giants! Because if you've ever looked at like a porous rock that is full of holes because it has water and stuff on it, and then you think that the earth is just a giant composite rock with 75% water all over it, and then you think that I'm sure there's nothing beneath us, it's just straight solid rock and everything that the government tells us is true, and there's definitely not giants underneath, and I am going off the deep end. Alright, back to so being upside down and from the ground to sky, that sounds like Hollow Earth to me. And, you know, normally these inverted people are, you know, like taller than the people on the ground. So, you know, tall underground. That sounds to me like Nephilim protocols. So Nephilim, if you didn't watch my Bible iceberg, is in relation to the concept of... Here's the fun part. Nephilim is the original Hebrew word. The word in English is giants. That's right, the Nephilim are the original Old Testament giants. Hey kids, so I know we really want to talk about giants and creepy Hollow Earth conspiracy stuff, but Dad's got to pay the bill. And since that's all the information we have on it, this is a giant that shot out of Hollow Earth, like it was down there, and it heard there were researchers, so it just like shot itself or a statue of itself out of the Hollow Earth. And then they took this picture, and then you thought it'd be really funny to hide it again. And that's what happened, and guess what? You can't prove me wrong, so we're just gonna move on. Or there's even some depictions of these, like, you know, like, really big people who used to be able to make these really cool structures because they were really tall and strong. And I'm gonna contain myself now, and I'm not gonna say it, so we're just gonna move on.